So this composition is called Ruby Road, and this is one that I wrote for a few reasons. And the first reason was I had never used Sibelius before, and I wanted to learn how to use it. So I set myself the goal of writing a composition entirely in Sibelius, and this was the result. Secondly, I was listening to one of my influences, Hitoshi Sakamoto, and I really wanted to emulate his sound. So there's some elements in here that do actually capture some things that he does, but we'll go into that a bit later. So first of all, let's just listen to it. So yeah, that's Ruby Road. All right, there's many elements in here, so let's break them down. Well, first of all, we'll go to section A. So section A was basically, this was the very first bit that came together, and out of all the sections, this came together the easiest. I wish I could say it about the whole composition, but that was definitely not true. There was a lot of work that went into this. So with section A, the feeling I'm going for, all right, let's take a step back. With a lot of my compositions, I think the images I have in my mind are influenced by movies and video games. And so most of my compositions have a trajectory of a kind of journey. Ruby Road is no different. And I think Ruby Road especially was consciously meant to be like a journey. So section A is kind of the part where you're first setting out on a journey. You're excited, like the sun is shining, the fields are open, there's so many possibilities. And I wanted to evoke that feeling. You know, it's kind of marching forwards, everything's just upbeat and feeling good. So if we just break down some of the instruments quickly, one of the first things I made was the piano. Now I've got two pianos going here, just creating a kind of rhythmic sound. It's basically chords and notes just being used rhythmically, but still creating that kind of positive texture. Now if we look at the strings and isolate them, these are a lot slower, but these are creating more of the harmony, and more of the mood and the atmosphere. If we go up to the percussion, which was one of the last elements to come into this section, it's really just a snare drum. And so what I did was I tried to create a lot of variation in the drums here. So a lot of rhythmic variation, which you can see with all the quarter notes and the eighth notes and the 16 notes kind of switching between each other. The last instrument used in the intro here is the trumpet. The trumpet is the melody line in all of this. So most of it's rhythmic, but then we have the trumpet just kind of leading the way with the melody. So all of that comes together to form section A, that kind of feeling good about the future. And then we transition into section B. And so we have a transition here, where everything slows down and kind of comes together and builds up to B. So now section B, we've got a slightly different feeling. It's not bad, it's not a bad feeling yet, it's not sad or anything like that, but it's not quite as upbeat. In some ways it's almost regal with the use of these horns. Now the real feeling I was going for here was one of, alright, so we're on the adventure and the challenges are coming, but they're still at a level where we're feeling good, we're feeling capable, and we can meet those challenges. So especially these horns, which really drive this section. These are major and sus chords that are kind of moving around, not really following a specific key, but moving around. And this technique was actually essentially the technique that I got from Hitoshi Sakimoto. That was the bit I wanted to learn how to do and pick. And so I was pretty happy with how this turned out. So underneath those horns, we have some strings here. We've got violins, which just doing kind of a rhythmic pulse underneath. And then we have a cello here, which is doing these like mazzicato stabs, which actually work in tandem with the horns, kind of emphasizing certain beats and kind of giving some rhythmic back and forth between the two. So section B doesn't have a whole lot of instrumentation, but it kind of, between the cellos and the horns, it's still quite wide. And then we move into section C. So here's the transition. Again, everything slows down, builds up. And something feels not quite right here. As we move into section C, things start getting a bit more dissonant. You know, I was talking about the challenges and meeting the challenges here. Section C is, you know, that part in any project or any journey where you meet a challenge and it's too hard and you don't quite make it the first time, you know, ultimately you fail. That's what section C is really about. So in the horns here and the trombone, so if we just look at those, we're doing these chord stabs again. But there's something not quite right about it, something a little bit dissonant. It's still building up, but yeah, again, it's like a more dissonant version of the last section. Now, if we look at the strings, if we just look at the cellos, we've got two cellos here. One's doing a pulse. One's doing a quiet chord that's kind of doubling what the horns were doing. And then we have the violins here. So if I just isolate that. So we start off with this pizzicato for the violins. But as it goes up, and then it eventually switches to mazzicato, which you can hear there. So if we just isolate all the strings, we're going pizzicato, and then mazzicato, and it really builds up that tension. So let's listen to all of that together again. You can feel it rising, Builds up to this one final dissonant chord, brings in the drums again, and we go back to section A. So this is section A again. Unfortunately, Sibelius doesn't let me put in the letter A again, but so we've come back, we've done this cycle. So this is, in the journey, we've reached this challenge that's too hard, and we've failed, and we've kind of fallen, but we have to get back up again. So we go back to section A again, we're marching along, which is great, and then we go to section B again. That happens again. Now this time, at the end of section B, we're a bit more experienced. We're reaching a challenge again, but we're a little bit more prepared this time. So this transition's slightly different, and then we go into section D. You can hear the drums here, they're marching. And the horns are a little bit more empowered. And it's building up and up and building up and up. And because what it's setting up is a key change that's coming here. Now this key change I really wanted. I put in a lot of work to make this key change work in my eyes and ears. I had to try many different things to kind of get the right transition to it. Because we're switching to a G major key here, and long story short, I tried many different keys, and to get all the instruments to feel like they were rising together, it just took a lot of work. Anyway, so let's break down section D now. So at the end of section C, we have here a timpani, we have cymbals coming in, the snares are coming in, and they're starting to build up together, build up the tension. And then we have this first little explosion right here. And so if we break this down a little bit, what's going on here? We'll start off with the horns. So it's kind of a slow melody. It's more of just harmonies, but with a slight melody happening over the top. This is like a progression that's kind of creating something a bit more empowered. Then if we look at just the percussion, we have the timpani that's happening first the start of the bar and then twice a bar, and then it goes to 4 times the bar, and then it speeds up more and more, building up intensity, energy. If we just isolate the snares and the cymbals, so we've got a steady beat happening. Each bar has its own crescendo, so it's got this first beat on the bar is strong, and then it goes quiet, and then it builds up again. And you can hear it builds up and up until eventually we get to this last bar of the first half, where the drums have this and then explode into the second section. Now just before we go to the second section, I'll just show you, I've also got harps and strings happening here, which isn't very loud, but this is kind of padding out the section a bit more. And then the violins come in again with a building up rhythm. All right, now we'll go to the second section of D again, which I'm very excited about. and that's the key change. And one thing you'll notice is everything's built up, but the drums disappear. Now I did that to invoke the feeling of flying. To me, having the drums drop out like that, it feels like your feet are leaving the ground. And originally when I did that, I had the problem of, all right, so we've built up the drums and then we take them out, and you're left then with a less energetic, less intense section. So then I had to think about how to, and keep trying to build up all the other instruments to kind of pick up where the drums left off. And so this is what we end up with. So you can hear the horns are changing more frequently. We've got the violins going, and cellos to bring out bass end of the string section. But then there was the last thing that I added here was this. Something I'm quite happy with. It's very soft and subtle arpeggio that's happening on piano and then on violin. That was one of the last things that went in, and to me it added that extra layer of feeling like you're flying. So if we just listen to this again from the change. The horns are very heroic here, and then we end on this final chord, and then we go to section E. This is you've beaten the challenge that you couldn't before. You've gone further than you could before, and this is the time of reflection and feeling good about life, essentially. So we've taken out most of the instruments, and we're left with just a few here. So it starts off with two things. This is just the harp, which is just this little strum, and that just repeats every second bar. And then what we have here is another arpeggio of violin, but very soft. Now what this does is it kind of creates the atmosphere. It pads it out. So it's an arpeggio of two chords going back and forth. And I have it as a crescendo and then a descendo, so it's kind of pulsing in and then back out again. And for me, it really creates the feeling of, the image I get is kind of like looking at the night sky in an open meadow. It's that real moment of reflection and feeling good about things and just that kind of rest. So then if we look at the melody in here, first of all, we've got the horn, again, doing a slower melody. But then we've also got cello kind of coming in and out originally, and first of all happening in unison with the horn, and then eventually it departs and starts doing some counterpoint, a little bit of contrary motion, I believe. And I really wanted this to have the two voices kind of start together and then go out and then come back together and kind of weave around each other, because I've heard it in a few songs and it's just a technique I really like. Because for me, having that kind of duet of voices creates a real emotional potency that I wanted for this final section. So if we just listen to this again with all the instruments, you can see we've got the duet of the two voices and we've got the atmosphere of the arpeggios, and it's kind of just creating that feeling. And then we bring back in the drums, because being inspired by video game music, it's made to loop. And those drums then go right back to the start. So that is Ruby Road.